Well, I guess that episode put my "is Burnham leaving" theory to bed. We see a touching tribute to Spock, and Saru makes an interesting choice for temporary first officer. Stay with us as we review Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 7, Unification, Part 3. Now, if this is your first contact with us, welcome aboard. My name's Carl Bromley, and this is the Trekkie's Guide to the Galaxy. So, I've just finished watching Unification Part 3, and I've got really mixed emotions on it, which is quite ironic really when you consider where the episode takes place. You know, before I continue with this review, I'm going to go back and watch it again and try and make my mind up on a few things. Just hold on a sec. Right, so the story for this episode basically centres around Burnham going to Vulcan, or Navarre as it's now known, to try and get hold of some data from a 120-year-old experiment the Vulcans were conducting called SB-19, which she believes holds the key information to locating the source of the burn, but that the Vulcans are reluctant to share because they believe it shows that they were responsible for it. The opening scene to this episode has Burnham recording her personal log, explaining again that she isn't sure she belongs on Discovery. And I get that it's the setup for the episode, but we've heard it several times now. The next scene with Tilly was brilliant. It's one of the few times I can recall anyone on a personal level telling Michael how her decision impacted them and that it wasn't her decision to make. Burnham even looked very confused at Tilly confronting her, but it made perfect sense. And I think her confusion was not only because she couldn't believe that Tilly was disagreeing with her not having revealed what she was going to do in the last episode, but that, of all people, Tilly was the one calling her out on her actions and making sure that she realises the impact that she has on others by making decisions for them. It not only goes to show the strain that Burnham's putting on their friendship, but also it goes to show the journey that Tilly's on. She's definitely maturing and her character's coming on fast. Maybe a little too fast, but we'll get to that later. During the scene, we get an analysis of the black box that was retrieved in the last episode, and when correlated with the data from two other black boxes, including one from the USS Yelchin, nice nod to Anton from the Kelvin timeline movies there, it proves that the burn has a point of origin and wasn't instantaneous across the whole galaxy. So, armed with this new information, Burnham and Saru approach Admiral Vance to request the data from SB-19. We learn from Vance that the unification process started by Spock in the TNG two-part episode of the same name between the Romulans and the Vulcans did come to fruition, and that the planet Vulcan is now called Navarre. Oh, and that point also puts to sleep any theories about Discovery being based in the Kelvin timeline, as Vulcan was destroyed in the first Kelvin film. And there's also several other points throughout the episode that confirm Discovery is absolutely canon and based in the Prime timeline, as you'll see. So, sorry to all the Discovery haters out there who try and discredit it and say it's not Prime canon. Anyway, we learn that Navarre left the Federation soon after the burn. This was because they believe their alternative to warp experiment, which was SB-19, caused the burn. And it was the Federation that continued to force its development after they'd expressed concerns over its safety. So, yet another founding member of the Federation is now going it alone, and there's been no contact with them for nearly a century. Vance decides that the best way to open a dialogue with the Vulcans is to send the sister of Spock, Burnham. Now, in all fairness to Michael, she does point out that she doesn't feel she is the best person to represent the Federation right now, but Vance forces the issue. Now, I'm going to come back to the next couple of scenes in a bit because They deserve some time dedicating to them, so we'll just crack on with the review part for now. So, Discovery jumps to Navarre and is greeted by the President, Terena, who quickly dismisses their request for the SB-19 data. Now, this next bit annoyed me probably about as much as I think it did Saru. Burnham takes the reins, overstepping the mark again without consulting her captain, forcing Terena into a diplomatic corner by invoking the ancient Vulcan tradition of Takal and Ket, in which she must vigorously defend her theory with logic and science against a quorum of Vulcans and Romulans, in order to convince them to hand over the SB-19 data. Probably not the best move when you're trying to re-establish good relations with people that don't trust you, especially after being told that the planet is still struggling internally with the reunification process. Thank God for Saru. Thanks to his excellent diplomatic skills throughout the episode, he manages to keep President Terena on side and show his willingness to listen to their thoughts and reasons, while sharing his own point of view, but without passing judgment. And personally, if I were the captain, I'd have to take Burnham into the ready room and remind her about who the captain is, and the reason for her demotion from the first officer position. Hell, after the mission was over, I think I'd have to give her a full dressing down, considering it's already been highlighted that it was hoped she'd learned from her lessons about this type of behaviour and its potential consequences. Burnham might be there to help open channels of communication, but what she's not there for is to force that communication. Not a great first impression. To aid Burnham in the Takal and Ket, she's assigned an advocate, and a familiar one at that. It now transpires that since the reunification of the Romulans and Vulcans, only members of the Order of the Qowat Milat are able to serve in that role. Now, we were introduced to this sect of Romulan warrior nuns who live and die by the rule of absolute candour in Star Trek Picard earlier this year, and it's another nice tie-in that shows Discovery's canon. And who does Burnham's advocate turn out to be? None other than her mother, Dr. Gabrielle Burnham. Now, this just seemed a little bit of a cheat to me. I get that it helps tie up a loose end, Burnham finding a mother, and don't get me wrong, I'm glad that it hasn't taken up a full episode this season to do that. But it did seem rather convenient, especially with how the Takal and Ket then unfolded, which, to be fair, Michael wasn't faring very well at by herself, and if it hadn't have been for her advocate breaking her down, which, by the way, I actually quite liked because it was the second time this episode that Burnham was put in her place by someone that she didn't expect it of. Now, I know that this is coming across as a bit of a Burnham bashing video, but I feel like I've just got to get this out. I've said before that I've never really warmed to Burnham as a character, but that at the start of this season, I thought the changes that they've been making to the direction she's taking have made her a much more likeable and realistic character. The trouble for me is that to move her development forward, the writers of this episode took the character traits backwards. It highlighted that over the last couple of episodes, she's gone back to the Burnham that genuinely believes, despite rank, despite protocol or orders or even friendships, she knows what is best for absolutely everyone in every situation. And that simply cannot be true of any one person. Maybe that's why Captain Pike was such a breath of fresh air in Season 2. He was a genuine leader who listened to his officers and made informed decisions. And, to top it off, in this episode, she is put in the position where that actually is the case, by being the only person who could possibly open a dialogue with the Vulcans. But, thanks to her mother, it's spelled out to Burnham, and to us as the audience, why that's the case. And why it's always been the case, since the very first episode of Discovery. her need to insinuate her own importance stems from the need to fill the emotional void that was left from being an orphaned, emotional human child raised on Vulcan. After Burnham realises what her mother was trying to do by getting her to open up and be 100% truthful, she withdraws her request for the SB19 data, as she doesn't want to be the one that causes peace on Navarre to deteriorate, and therefore be the one who undoes all that was achieved by Spock. It showed that the Federation, for whom she speaks, is able to put the needs of the few ahead of the needs of the many. And as pointed out by Terena, this was a problem that the Federation had leading up to the burn. As much as the old Vulcan maxim tells us that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, what any government or organisation must realise is that the needs of those many should never come at the expense of its people. And Burnham's actions showed Terena that at least someone in the Federation is now able to make that distinction. In fact, it impresses her so much, she decides it's worth the risk of trusting Burnham and the Federation, and hands over the SB19 data, closing the episode's A-plot. Now, there's two more things I want to cover in this video. First, acting First Officer Sylvia Tilly. Now, this is nothing against the character, who, so far throughout Star Trek Discovery, has probably had some of the most growth and development of any character. But realistically, would a captain take his lowest ranked and least experienced bridge officer and put them in the position of first officer? The person who everyone has to depend on when the captain isn't around. Why not pick Lieutenant Nilsson, who's sat in the big chair a few times already this season and is obviously command trained? Honestly, it sounds like the sort of thing that would only happen in an alternate reality. Say, when a captain's about to leave the ship and doesn't expect to return, he gives command to his current number one and promotes a cadet who's in the middle of a disciplinary hearing to first officer. I mean, surely, if that sort of thing ever happened in Star Trek, in any universe, there would be just as much uproar as there has been over this. Or is it that Saru sees something in Tilly that we've all missed? And you know what? After realising that I myself have praised Tilly several times this season in my reviews for the way that she's grown, I'd be willing to admit that I probably overreacted to the suggestion, thinking it was a daft choice that made no sense. Now, don't get me wrong, I still don't agree with the decision of making her the acting first officer, but I can understand Saru's reasons. I just think that perhaps the better approach would have been to recognise her with a promotion to lieutenant. But you know what? We may all end up eating our words over the next few episodes. She's obviously going to be put into a tricky position where she'll have to take command. So let's just wait and see how it plays out. And the second thing I want to do is I want to give credit where credit's due to the writers, the actors, the composer for the series, for the simply beautiful way that they paid tribute to the late great Leonard Nimoy as Spock, using his appearance in the TNG episodes Unification Parts 1 and 2. I mean, I had no doubt it was always going to be in there, but I've got to admit that as much as I enjoy Discovery, I was a little nervous about how it was going to be presented, but it was perfect. And I think the look of joy and admiration on Michael's face as she was discovering the pivotal person that her brother grew into was probably that of many a Trekkie watching, and coupled with the beautiful music score in the background, I know I certainly got lost in the moment and almost had a tear in my eye. The speech that was selected was poignant for the episode, the season as a whole, and also the world that we live in. And if you haven't done so already, re-watch it with that in mind. So, now it's time to rate the episode, and I really struggled with this one. It's taken me a lot longer to put this review out, nearly a week, because I had to wrestle with almost everything that happened and try to figure out in my head what I thought was going on. And I've probably missed the mark on most things, but you know what? That's what's great about Star Trek. Very often it can mean different things to different people, and it's always good to spark debate and conversation about the things that Star Trek shows us. Now, I didn't think this was a particularly strong episode, but taking what I've just said into consideration and several other elements, not least of which is the way the tributes to the Trek greats that are sadly no longer with us were portrayed, I'm going to give Discovery Season 3, Episode 7, Unification Part 3, a warp factor rating of 7.5. Well, thanks for watching, folks. I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you did, please smash the like button for us. As always, especially with this episode, I would love to hear your thoughts about it, so drop those down in the comments below and let's discuss. Also, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell for notifications so that you never miss a video. And until next time, set a course for Discovery Season 3, Episode 8, Warp 7.5. Engage.